Cleveland to find some work. And so I went to Cleveland and went to an agency, David and Lee, and they said, you gotta have some more classes. And I'm like, what? And they go, but this time it's gonna be a photography class, and the photos you're gonna be able to show to the photographers. And so I took the class, got the portfolio, and then the agency handed me a list of photographers and said, okay, now go out and knock on their doors and show them your pictures. And I'm like, you mean you're not gonna do this for me? And so I thought, oh my gosh, I'm terrified to knock on anybody's door and to tell anybody I want to be a model. And I'm not even, I'm so insecure about this. But if I don't, my dream ends right here. So I made a few phone calls, I went on some appointments, and I got my first job. It was a print job. I think it was for Carson Perry Scott. And I was terrified now. Now I was terrified. It was like, oh my gosh, this is my one opportunity. If I blow it, it's all over with. And I'm so freaked out. I'm not confident at all. I have no self-confidence at all. But if I blow it, it's totally over. And so the only thing I can do is just go for it. And so I got there to the day of the shoot. There were 3 other models on set with me. There was a photo of 4 of us, and I went for it. And they called me back. I got a campaign, a wedding campaign after that. I was the bride of the year, and I got full page ads like 3 times a week for like a couple months after that. And they were so good to me. Cleveland was wonderful to me. But also, as I was working as a model, because that went on for a couple years, they would call in other models from Chicago to work with us. And I thought, well, I wonder what it's like to work in Chicago. I mean, it's a bigger market. Maybe they'd like me. And so at that time, I was now married, and my husband picked up a camera, and every 2 feet, he's taking a picture here, he's taking a picture there. We could not go on a successful walk anymore. It was every other 3 minutes taking a picture. And I'm like, Tony, what do you think if you and I go to Chicago and you try and be a photographer and I try and be a model? And at that time, we both kind of got laid off of our jobs. It was a recession. And so he agreed. We moved to Chicago. He gets a job as an apprentice to a product photographer. And David and Lee was also in Chicago, so I started to model there. And I did a little bit of work. I got some work, I think, Carson's, but not like I did in Cleveland. It wasn't going to go as well for me in Chicago. I don't know if it was because I was getting older, and back then, if you weren't, after a certain age, you aged out. And so I thought, well, what can I do? The only thing I know how to do is waitress, because I only had a year of college, and model. And I'm like, what can I do? And now I come from a family of entrepreneurs. And so we know how to start businesses in our family. As you're probably going to hear about 3 or 4 businesses I've started. But anyway, so I thought, well, maybe I could teach some modeling classes. And so I called my agent, Lee, and I said, Lee, would you send me some girls if I could teach them how to do their hair and makeup and teach them how to perform in front of a camera? And she goes, well, Barb, can they use those photos for their comps? I go, well, I don't know. And she goes, Barb, they need classes, but they'll pay for prints. I go, let me call you back. So I called Tony. Now, Tony is working for a product photographer, and he's working 60 to 80 hours a week for $125 a week. And that's how that went. You didn't get paid much, but it was apprenticing, and afterwards you could really go right back into that profession and make lots of money. So anyway, I called him. I said, Tony, if I do the girls' hair and makeup, would you have time to take the photos? And he says, yes. So I get my first client, and Tony doesn't have time to take the photos. Now, I had never picked up a camera before this moment, but I had been paying attention to what the photographers were doing when I was having my picture taken. I knew that they put the lights there. I knew so many things, except for I've never picked up a camera before. But cameras were now kind of automatic, so I thought, Tony gave me a crash course on automatic, and I started taking pictures. I took her picture, and within 3 months, I was making enough money shooting model composites that Tony was able to quit his job and join me, and we started our own photography team. So anyway, I wanted to go after fashion. And I was trying to think, okay, and we did get a couple accounts, some small accounts, but I wanted to go after Marshall Fields. And I had become a Christian at this time, and I believed in the power of prayer. So what I did was I went to prayer and I said, God, can I have Marshall Fields? And I felt like he said, yes. So anyway, I didn't go right away to knock on a door. For the next year and a half, I studied their ads. And I tested everything that I thought they would like. I did, I shot different fashion with different models. And I remember telling all the other photographer friends that we had, we're going to go after Marshall Fields. And they go, yeah, you and every other photographer in this city, you'll never get him. I go, oh no, I prayed and God said we could have it. Their eyes would roll up. But you know what? They couldn't discourage me. I really believed that God said we could have it. So they couldn't discourage me. So anyway, a year and a half later, we went and I got a comp. And I knocked on Marshall Field's door, handed them the cup because they didn't have time to see me. And we got our first job the same day. So that was fun. So we started to shoot some fashion. And this is where I discovered designing again. When I would go and take my portfolio into different clients' places, you were there for 5 minutes. You never even took your coat off because mostly it's winter in Chicago, you know that. And so I thought, well, I don't need a fashion wardrobe. All I need is a fashion coat. And so I shopped around, couldn't find one. And I thought, well, I know how to sew. I'll design one. I'm going to make one. And I made this wild and crazy coat. And every time I wore that coat, I'd walk outside. Men would come up to me and say, where did you get that coat? Women would come up to me and say, where did you get that coat? And I thought, I got something here. So I went and I redesigned it in 3 different ways. And then we have the apparel center in Chicago where they have market and all the store owners come and see what's in the market. And so I took it to a showroom to see if they would show my coat at market time. And I got one to accept it. And they said, listen, there's a fashion show during Market Week that shows the clients all the kind of new stuff that's available to them. Do you want your coats to be in that fashion show? And I said, sure. And so the day of the fashion show came, my mom's sitting there, my sister's sitting there, and I'm sitting there, and the show's been going on for 15 minutes. And all of a sudden my coats come on them on the fashion show on the runway. And the people started to applaud. And I looked at my sister and I go, why are they clapping? And she goes, it's your coats. They love your coats. And I'm like, oh. So anyway, I had a toddler. I had a 2-year-old at home. And I can only tell you how much work it is to sew and how expensive it is to sew. And I needed money and I didn't have the time. I even had Marshall Fields come in and look at the coats. But I'm like, this is over my head. I can't do this. This is way too stressful and too expensive. I can't do this. And I felt like the Lord said, I showed you that I could open the doors, but the time is not right. Wait until the time is right, and I will once again open the doors, but wait until the time is right. So I put aside designing and I went back to photography for a short while, because baby number 2 was on the way, and then baby number 3, and anybody knows you can't really afford to work a lot of times when you got kids. And so I went home to be a mom, and Tony was a photographer still. And then he gets a job at Baxter, and he is going to run their photography department. And so we were living in Chicago, and we moved to the burbs closer to where he was going to work. Well, soon after we got here, I started to shoot weddings. I had a house where my front house, people could come in, but the TV room and everything else was off, so I could entertain clients. I could have clients come into my house. And so I found a way that I could work at home as a photographer, and I did weddings, senior portraits. I had some corporate clients, and life was good. I was doing pretty well at home. Working as a freelance photographer. And then Tony, I felt like the Lord said he was going to lose his job. And I said, Tony, you're going to lose your job. I'm not sure when, but I wasn't worried about it because we had I mean, we knew how to bounce back. We bounced back many times before. And I wasn't worried about it, but I just said, I feel like the Lord says you're going to lose your job. Well, then about a month later, I have this dream. And in the dream, we're walking down the path, Tony and I, and on the ground is a Hasselblad camera. And I didn't know what a Hasselblad camera was. It's a very expensive camera, but on it was a sign that said Hasselblad, so I knew it was a Hasselblad. And I go, Tony, someone threw a camera out, pick it up. And so he goes and he picks the camera up. Well, we walk down the path some more, and there's another camera and another sign that says Hasselblad. I says, Tony, there's another camera, pick it up. And he picks it up. And that's the end of the dream. I tell him the dream, and he goes, nobody ever throws away Hasselblad cameras. Nobody. That's just ridiculous. I go, well, maybe they won't throw it away. Maybe somebody will sell it for cheap. Keep your eyes open for it. So I go out and I buy a camera bag, getting ready for the cameras. Seriously. So he finds out about 2 weeks later that they're going to shut the department down. They're going to close the entire graphics department down, including the photography studio. And they gave him instructions to sell his entire studio off. Well, he got a partner, a financial partner, and they put a bid in to buy the studio. And they accepted the bid. Now, there was 3 Hasselblad cameras. One of them was a $50,000 new digital camera, and the other 2 were just the normal 2 1/4 cameras. So what they did, they bought the whole studio, they sold off what they didn't want, and we got the 2 cameras for free. Well, what happened then was, he went into business doing digital photography with his new partner, and I was still doing wedding photography. And I was doing pretty well. I mean, I was loving it. I was doing really well at home. And then I have a girlfriend who works at a 1-hour lab where all my prints were being printed. And she calls me and she goes, Barb, I was just told they're going to close the lab down. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I go, these people give me great prints at a very inexpensive price, and there's nobody around like them. What am I going to do? And so I start talking with Tony. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And all of a sudden, we're taking this walk. And I'm like, Tony, what am I going to do? Because if you sent your film out, there were horror stories where people sent their film out, and it got lost. And it was a wedding. And it just totally freaked me out. And so we're on this walk, and I'm discussing it with Tony. I'm like, what am I going to do? And all of a sudden, I'm like, Tony, the Lord says we're going to open up a 1-hour photo. Didn't hear a voice. Don't know how I got that information. And it's happened to me before, so I recognized it. But when I got the information, I says, Tony, the Lord says we're going to open up a 1-hour photo. And so that was in May. So I go home. We have internet by now, but we're still using film. I go into the internet and find out what it costs to open up a 1-hour lab. One piece of equipment, film processor, $15,000. A printer, 5x7s to wallets, $25,000. Then I could check the area rents out, $1,200 to $1,600 a month. And I'm like, I don't want to do it. We haven't even done the chemicals in the paper yet. I said, all I'll be doing is working for rent and to pay equipment off. I'm like, I don't want to do it. So I forgot about it. And I started taking bike rides. I was enjoying my summer. And Tony started calling me a playbaby because I was enjoying my summer. And then all of a sudden I heard, I'd go to the beach and I'd do my prayer walks on the beach and just really just enjoying the summer days. And I started hearing the Lord call me a playbaby because he wanted me to open that store. He was like, open that store, open that store. And I'm like, okay, I'll tell you what, Lord, this is end of August. If you'll release the money, I'll open the store. That was on Friday. I go home, I set my kids on the couch because I always like to tell them what I think the Lord's telling me to do so they can see how the Lord operates. I told the Lord today that if he would release the money, I would open a store. Let's see what he does. And then later that day I thought, well, maybe I should call the Better Business Bureau or somebody to try and get money. And so I call him and I meet him on Monday. And I go in there and there's 2 or 3 guys, I can't remember now. And they go, well, do you have a business plan? I go, no. And they go, well, do you know who your customers are going to be? I go, no. have you ever run a lab before? I go, no. And they're looking more and more confused, and they're going, well, we'd like to give you some money, but we can't until you have a business plan. So come on back when you get a business plan. So I went home, and I thought, well, I did my job, Lord. Now, I'm off the hook, kind of speaks. Wednesday, the gal who works at the lab calls me, and she goes, Barb, they're moving the equipment out, and they're moving a film processor out, and I asked them what they're going to do with that machine, and if they would sell it to somebody local. Are you interested? I go, I don't know how much they want for it. And she goes, $1,500. So that Friday, I have a film processor in my garage. So the next week she calls me, Barb, they're moving out the printer. Do you want it? I go, how much? $2,500. That was the one that cost $25,000. So that Friday, I now have a printer and a film processor in my garage. So now I'm traveling down the street and Sheridan Road, and I noticed a store next to Lucy's, if y'all know where Lucy's is, that was selling signs. And I thought, well, if I've got two machines, I'm probably going to need a store. I'm probably going to need a sign. So I go in there to find out how much a sign costs. And their place is a mess. And they go, forgive us, we're moving. I go, really? How much is the rent? $400. So I secured that place for $400 a month. And then the guy who's been selling me the equipment, he's from Georgia, his name is Enrique, and he goes, Barbara, I have one more equipment to sell you. And that's his accent. I go, Enrique, I'm already feeling uncomfortable with how much money I'm spending. He goes, Barbara, he says, this one does 8x10s to 11x14s. He goes, it goes brand new for $65,000. I'm selling it to you for $3,500. I go, let me call you back. So I get on the internet. It's true. It was going for $65,000 brand new. And so I called him back. I go, okay, Enrique, I'll buy it. So now I have a complete lab for $10,000 on a credit card. And here's the thing. We've never worked a lab before. We don't have a clue how to run a store. And so we found this man from Winnetka who owned a lab. He took pity on us. And he sold us some of his extra chemicals and extra paper, and he told Tony kind of how to operate the machine. And we had that thing up and going in a short amount of time. But that story showed me what the Lord could do financially, because I was going to need that kind of information coming up. Well, soon after that, about 10 years later, I'm not sure, I'm not sure about the timeline. All my kids were about graduated. Our marriage had always been tough. And Tony said he wanted a divorce. So after 34 years of marriage, we're divorced. Now for the first 2 years, talk about trauma. I mean, overnight, I said they're all 18 and over. I have no kids and no husband overnight. And I'm like, what am I going to do? I mean, because before that, I got back up. The photography had gone so well, I was doing just under 6 figures, and the Lord had said, close it down. And I said, because I'm an author, and you see some of the books back there, he says, I want you to dedicate yourself to writing. And so I told Tony, I says, Tony, all you have to do is say no. That's all. I feel like this is what the Lord says, but if you say no, then, that's what goes. And he didn't say no. He said, yes, go ahead. I want you to close it down. And so I closed it down. But what I did do is I went and got a school bus driving job, so I had some income. But it wasn't an income I had to concentrate on. I would just go to work, and then that was it. It wasn't like I had to concentrate like you have to do when you own your own business. So anyway, that had happened, and then Tony asked for a divorce. And so when he asked for a divorce, I was a bus driver. And it was like a storm. I mean, I don't know. I just never saw it coming. I mean, it's not that our marriage wasn't tough. I just never saw it coming. I thought God would save our marriage, and I ended up divorced. And so 2 years after I get divorced, the Lord says, I want you to start that design line. I go, what? I'm like, I have hardly 2 cents to rub together, and you want me to go back to designing? And he goes, yes, now's the time to start that design line. So I was struggling with it because I knew the work it would take. I mean, I know what kind of work this was going to take. I knew what kind of risk taking it was going to take. And I struggled with it. And at that time, he gave me a vision of a woman from Haiti. It was right when the earthquake hit. And this woman was in heaven, and she goes, "Why didn't you care enough to help us?" And I'm like, I wanted to tell her all my reasonings for not wanting to help her. I had financial difficulties myself. But I thought, well, she isn't going to get it. She's from Haiti. I mean, you know, she has far worse situations than I do. And I thought, you know what, I live in America. If I'm willing to go for it, we can create wealth here in America. So I said, Lord, I'm going to go for it. So the first thing, I mean, I hadn't picked up a fashion magazine in 20 years. And you know what, at that time, fashion was like checks and stripes and polka dots. It's like, this looks like a fashion disaster. I mean, I could not relate to the fashion I was seeing at that time. And I'm like, I haven't been in Chicago in 15 years. I don't even know if there's still a fashion market there. I don't know what's going on. But I thought, well, I always thought I'd start with the t-shirt line. And so what I did with my meager funds is I went to Walmart and I bought some oversized men's cotton t-shirts, cut them up, made some really cute women's t-shirts, and sold them on Etsy. And it started to go well. I mean, the women were loving these t-shirts. And that started to grow and grow, but I still didn't know where anything was at. Where do you get more film? Not film, but fabric. Where do you sell your goods anymore? I didn't know how to connect the dots. And so I decided to go on a fast. And I fasted for a week. And at the end of the week, the Lord says, there's going to come an opportunity for you to work with the city of Chicago. Keep your eyes open for it. And so the next week, nothing happened. But the second week, a friend of mine called. She goes, Barb, the city of Chicago is going to have a contest. And it's whoever gets it gets to do, they're going to teach them the fashion business. And you get to sell your clothes off of Michigan Avenue. Are you interested? I go, yeah, I'm going to check that out. And so what we had to do was we had to design a line of clothes and present it. We couldn't put our name on it anywhere. It was a blind jury that was going to judge it. And I got picked. I was one of 26 that got picked. Before then, I was like, where is the light switch? I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea how to do this. And after that program, I got into that program, I met designers. I said, where do you get your fabrics from? How do you sell your clothes? And some of them told me, well, they sell them at art shows. Because, you know, you got an instant audience. They do a wholesale too, but mostly they sold at art shows. And so I started to sell at art shows. And one of the biggest art show, how many of you know of a one of a kind in Chicago? Anybody been to it? 60,000 customers go through that in 4 days. And Etsy was saying, you know, because you're an Etsy customer, we're going to give you a deal. It's only going to cost you $800 to get into to be a one-of-a-kind artist. That was still a chunk of change for me, and I was kind of nervous about it, but I decided to go for it after I had met all these other designers, and they were saying that was the way to go. That first year, the women bombed my site, and I sold $12,000. I'm like, whoa, this does work. These are the best customers in the world. So I signed up for the next year. The next year I did 17,000. The next year did 22,000. The next year 28,000. The next year 32,000 in 4 days. And then, I mean, it was like it was going well. And then 2014 came. And I'm laying on the couch, it's October, and something hits me in the gut. And it was just that sudden. And I didn't have any health insurance or anything, so I didn't go to the doctor right away. But I wasn't getting any better. And my kids were bugging me to go to the doctor. And so finally I thought, well, I probably need at least an antibiotic. And so I went to the emergency room and I had a burst appendix. And they said you had 24 hours left to live before you got here. And I had to have emergency surgery. And I lost 2 shows. I lost the show's income. And my arrangement was, Lord, I'm going to spend what I have to spend, but every year you got to pay that off because I can't go into debt. And at the end of the year, I ended up with $17,000 worth of credit card debt I couldn't pay because I lost the 2 shows and some hospital debt. 2014, I was depressed. I had many conversations with God. It's like, God, I've worked 4 years, 2 jobs, bus driving, and I'm in debt. I'm in debt. How did this happen? I'm like, I want to quit. I want to quit. This has been hard, and I want to quit. And he says to me, is there not a cause worth fighting for? And he kept saying that to me. Is there not a cause worth fighting for? I'm like, no, there's no cause worth fighting. That's like this. And finally I said, yes, there's a cause worth fighting for. I says, but I'm going to tell you what. I'm going to work another year because I'm in debt. I'm paying off my debt, and I'm quitting after that. And so here's the thing. I had to reinvest. I had to buy more fabric. I had to remake new outfits. And so I went into more debt trying to get a new line together. But that 2015 was a record year. I paid off 2 years of debt, and I had money left over, and I went and bought some furniture and other stuff. And I thought, how can I quit now? This is such a victory. This is such a victory. And then, let me make sure. Oh yeah, that's what's next. This is the fun part. Then after that, 2018, I had been hearing about Macy's Fashion Incubator program, and I decided to apply for it. And so I did, and I was one of the ones chosen to be in their program. Well, now, through that program, I was actually going to get educated in how to be a designer. I'd never been educated to be a photographer. I'd never been educated to be a designer. But now, they did one-on-one with me. I worked with pattern makers. They showed me how to put markers together. We went to have my fabric cut like 800 in 1 hour, you know. And then I worked with contractors. I had my stuff produced. And I actually learned how to be a designer after all those years. And then the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic hit, and a lot of industries got affected with that. But the fashion industry, like I remember one of the designers from New York was doing a Zoom meeting with the Fashion Incubator people, and she was depressed. She was $1 million business, and she had 20 to 13 people working for her, and she had just started her production in Asia. All the stores start canceling their orders. They start canceling the orders, and she had to cancel her orders. And it was like that with all of us. All of us, sales stopped overnight, and we didn't work for about a year. At least a year, and we were waiting to see if it would ever turn around. It finally did turn around. Last August, the Lord said, get back up, start over again. I didn't change my mind. You're still a designer. I still have these plans for you, so get going. And the government did make good. The debt that I did have, I couldn't pay off. They did give us relief money, and so they did make good on that. And I was able to pay off that debt and get going again. And so here we are today. As I said, I've written 3 books. I've produced a fashion line. I've been very busy since my divorce. And talk about crazy, I'm dating my ex-husband. We've actually learned a few things since we got divorced. We learned we really do like each other. So that's good.